Hello everyone. Welcome once again to Miss Shannon's Story Time. So happy to have you here. If you're new, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. So we're still the day before Thanksgiving and I'm doing my second story for today. I wanted to pop on here and do this story, Stone Soup by Marcia Brown, as I think it's a great story to read during this Thanksgiving time. So here we go. Let's jump in to Stone Soup by Marcia Brown. This is To My Mother and Father from the author. A little dedication there. This is a really good story, I think, for Thanksgiving time. Three soldiers trudged down a road in a strange country. They were on their way home from the wars. Besides being tired, they were hungry. In fact, they had eaten nothing for 2 days. "How would I like a good dinner tonight," said the first. "And a bed to sleep in," said the second. "But all that is impossible," said the third. "We must march on." On they marched. Suddenly ahead of them, they saw the lights of a village. "Maybe we'll find a bite to eat there," said the first. "And a loft to sleep in," said the second. "No harm in asking," said the third. Now the peasants of the place feared strangers. When they heard that three soldiers were coming down the road, they talked amongst themselves. "Here come three soldiers. Soldiers are always hungry, but we have little enough for ourselves." And they hurried to hide their food. They pushed sacks of barley under the hay in the lofts. They lowered buckets of milk down the wells. They spread old quilts over the carrot bins. They hid their cabbage and potatoes under the beds. They hung their meat in the cellars. They hid all they had to eat. Then they waited. The soldiers stopped first at the house of Paul and Francois. "Good morning to you," they said. "Could you spare a bit of food for three hungry soldiers?" "We have no food for ourselves for 3 days," said Paul. Francois made a sad face. "It has been a poor harvest." The three soldiers went on to the house of Albert and Louise. "Could you spare a bit of food? And have you some corner where we could sleep for the night?" "Oh no," said Albert. "We gave all we could spare to soldiers who came before you." "Our beds are full," said Louise. At Vincent and Marie's house, the answer was the same. It had been a poor harvest. All the grain must be kept for seed. So it all went through the village. Not a peasant had any food to give away. They all had good reasons. One family had used the grain for feed. Another had an old sick father to care for. Had all too many mouths to fill. The villagers stood in the street and sighed. They looked hungry as they could. The three soldiers walked together. first soldier called out, "Good people." The peasants drew near. "We are 3 hungry soldiers in a strange land. We have asked you for food, and you have no food. Well, then we'll have to make stone soup." The peasants stared. Stone soup? That would be something to know about. "First, we'll need a large iron pot," the soldiers said. The peasants brought the largest pot they could find. "How else to cook enough?" "There's none too large," said the soldiers, "but it will do. And now water to fill it, and a fire to heat." It took many buckets of water to fill the pot. A fire was built on the village square, and the pot was set to boil. And now, if you please, 3 round, smooth stones. Those were easy enough to find. The peasants' eyes grew round as they watched the soldiers dip the stone into the pot. "Any soup needs salt and pepper," said the soldiers as they began to stir. Children ran to fetch salt and pepper. Stones like these generally make good soup, but oh, if there were carrots, it would be much better. "Why, I think I have a carrot or 2, said Francois, and she ran off. She came back with her apron full of carrots from the bin under the red quilts. "A good stone soup should have cabbage," said the soldiers as they sliced the carrots into the pot. "But no use asking for what you don't have." "I think I could find a cabbage or 2 somewhere," said Marie, and she hurried back home. She came back with 3 cabbages from the cupboard under the bed. "If only we had a bit of beef and a few potatoes, this soup would be good enough for a rich man's table." The peasants thought that over. They remembered their potatoes and the sides of beef hanging in the cellar. They ran to fetch them. A rich man's soup, and all of them from a few stones. It seemed like magic. "Ah," sighed the soldiers as they stirred in the beef and potatoes. "If only we had a little barley and a cup of milk, the soup would be fit for the king himself. Indeed, he asked for just such a soup when last he dined with us." The peasants looked at each other. The soldiers had entertained the king. Well, but no use asking for what you don't have, the soldiers sighed. The peasants brought their barley from the lofts. They brought their milk from the wells. The soldiers stirred the barley and milk into the steaming broth while the peasants stared. At last the soup was ready. "All of you shall taste," the soldiers said. "But first, a table must be set." Great tables were placed together, and all around were lighted torches. Such a soup! How good it smelled! Truly fit for a king. But then the peasants asked themselves, would not such a soup require bread and a roast and cider? Soon a banquet was spread, and everyone sat down to eat. Never had there been such a feast. Never had the peasants tasted such soup, and fancy made from stones. They ate and drank and ate and drank. And after that, they danced. They danced and sang far into the night. At last they were tired. Then the three soldiers asked, is there not a loft where we could sleep? Let three such wise and splendid gentlemen sleep in a loft. Indeed, they must have the best beds in the village. So the first soldier slept in the priest's house, the second soldier slept in the baker's house, and the third soldier slept in the mayor's house. In the morning, the whole village gathered in the square to give them a send-off. Many thanks for what you have taught us, the peasants said to the soldiers. We shall never go hungry, now that we know how to make soup from stones. Oh, it's all in knowing how, said the soldiers. And off they went down the road. The end. And over here there's a quote that says, such men don't grow on every bush. What I love about this story is, while it appears that the soldiers may have manipulated a little bit, they asked first, and when they did not receive, instead of being forceful or upset or worried about being hungry and no place to sleep or even being mad at the villagers, what they did was they came up with a creative solution to where they were creating an interest in what they were doing, and it made such an interest that everyone wanted to be involved. So by their asking, everyone in the village worked together and created a moment of appreciation and gratitude instead of a moment of being angry and sad, disappointed. It really has a good story and you can look at it in so many different ways. I hope you enjoyed the story. Everyone have a wonderful and happy Thanksgiving, and come back soon.